Hi, everyone. My name is Detective Sergeant Glenn Vandegrift. I'm with the Bensalem Township Police Department. I'm here today to talk about the use of our rapid DNA instrument from Thermo Fisher in victim identification. We've had numerous cases where we've assisted outside agencies and our coroner's office with identifying human remains, and I want to share that with you today. But first of all, I just want to give you a little bit of a background on our police department. So the Bensalem Township Police Department has 107 sworn officers. We're not that big of a department with 65,000 residents. And the big part of this is we border Philadelphia County. So we get a lot of crime that comes over from Philadelphia County. We average 60 to 65,000 calls for service a year. And our one little claim to fame is that Ben Franklin flew the kite. At least that's what they say, in Bensalem to do his electricity experiment. So that's where we're located. A little bit of information about us. So I want to tell you a little bit about the area in which we do our local DNA databasing. This is a fairly large area of southeastern Pennsylvania. This area consists of numerous individual police departments within the grade section that you can see on your screen. We all share a local DNA database. The other big piece to this is that the Philadelphia Police Department has a very large DNA database. And within the last couple of years, we tapped into that DNA database, creating an entirely regional DNA database that every police department, when they enter some type of DNA swab, whether it's a reference or evidence sample, gets entered into this big database. You see the counties that are involved. We even cover Newcastle County, Delaware, which is most of Delaware State. So we're all sharing this investigative DNA database with every sample that we either send to the lab for processing or we run in the rapid DNA instrument. We've been doing this program since 2010. So I don't have a slide big enough to show you the amount of items that we get DNA off of and we get DNA hits from. This is just a small portion of the type of things we get DNA off of. Some of the highlights in this are catalytic converter thefts, which have been a problem for a long time. We're swabbing the pipes where they're cutting them off or tools left behind. We're getting DNA profiles that we can use to identify suspects. This is a pretty exhaustive list, but all that being said, we have a very large database right now within this region. It's over 65,000 samples. That's not including the Philadelphia DNA database. So it's a very large area and a very large amount of DNA samples we're checking against every time we take a DNA swab and send it to the laboratory or put it in the RapidHIT ID instrument. So one important thing about our reference samples here in Bensalem Township is that we only collect reference samples from people by consent or by court order. We don't hold them down. We don't lock them in the back of police cars and say, you're not getting out till you give us your DNA. We're very conservative with the way we actually collect these samples. Anytime we go to collect a reference sample, the consent form that you see in front of you is read to the person. They get to review it and they get to sign it to give us their DNA. Now, a lot of people are like hesitant about this, but I will tell you that in the life of the program, we're at about 90 to 95% of all of our DNA collections are consensual, and people do in fact consent to give us their DNA. We also do court orders, search warrants quite often to collect people's DNA who do refuse, but then we have probable cause to get a search warrant to do that type of item. So that's just a real brief overview of our DNA program. Like I said, we've been doing that since 2010. But in 2017, we purchased a RapidHIT ID instrument. And this took our DNA to the next level. The reason why it took it to the next level is now instead of 6 months or 30 days like we do with the Bodhi Hits program, it took us to 90 minutes. We can now run a sample in this instrument. And it's easy to do. It's cop-proof, I like to say, because you just put a sample, a swab, into a cartridge, or like we may talk about today, some other items from Autopsy for the identification of victims, insert it into the instrument, and then 90 minutes later, you get a DNA profile that can then be checked against another profile or uploaded into a DNA database like the one I spoke about earlier. So this is a picture of our RapidHIT instrument sitting right in our police department. It's in its own room. You see it's a fairly small instrument with a laptop sitting next to it. In the top corner there, you see the sample cartridge itself. That one is an Intel cartridge that's used for the lower level DNA samples, as opposed to the ACE cartridge, which would be used for reference samples, such as buccal swabs directly from somebody's mouth. So the key points to this, it's standalone. It does the DNA profile in like 90 minutes, like I said. We can upload that XML file that's created by this instrument directly into our database, and within a couple of minutes get a return from our database if there are any DNA hits. We can also do familiar and kinship searches, which we'll talk about today. It's become a really important part of the way we utilize this instrument. And it's easy to use. Like I said, it's cop-proof. You don't have to have any scientific training. And one of the key features is police departments are 24/7, 365. So is this instrument. That's the most important part about this. We don't have to wait for a laboratory. We don't have to wait for a forensic analyst to be available. We can do it on our own and get results within 92 minutes. I want to talk a little bit today about a rapid DNA case that we did just within the last year or so. This is a significant case. It was all over the news here. And it all started back in October in 2022 when Percy Borough Police Department, which is a very small police department here in our county, took a missing report from the daughter of an adult female. She stated that she hadn't heard from her mom in days. Her mom usually calls her every day. They're best friends. And she was worried, so she went to their home where the victim and her husband, which would be the parents of the woman who was reporting, lived. When she talked to her father's like, oh, she disappeared a couple of days ago. She took some items with them, including $13,000. I think she took off because she just admitted to me a few days ago that she's been having a 3-year-long affair with somebody. So I think she ran off and she disappeared with that person. Obviously, suspicions from the daughter came up pretty quickly because that wasn't what her mom was. She called her daughter every day. She was always in contact with family. She wouldn't be having an affair. These were all things because they were best friends that she knew. So when she went to the home, the daughter went to the home and started looking around. The missing woman's cell phone, iPad, car keys, birth certificate, personal care items, even medications weren't taken. So her suspicions raised a little bit that her mom was missing, but things weren't quite adding up. Police received a report and they began an investigation to start to see if the missing woman had used her credit cards, had been seen anywhere, and nothing was found. Elizabeth Capaldi was the one that was missing. In November, she's missing for over a month now. Her husband was questioned over the few weeks since the day of the report to this date in November. He actually kept denying any involvement, keep repeating his story that she was involved in a 3-year affair. She probably ran off with the person, but certain parts of the case weren't adding up. They had asked several times if he would turn his cell phone over to investigators. At this point, they didn't have enough probable cause to seize it. He refused on several occasions. Eventually, he gave them his cell phone. And of course, when he consented to his cell phone and they did a search, they found numerous items that were deleted from the cell phone. And you can see some of the internet searches that he did here on the screen. How to get away with murder. How can you avoid police detection? Can a polygraph be skewed? Things like that. Obviously, the suspicions were raised to a very high level at this point from investigators. So they decided to form a grand jury to bring him in and compel him to testify in this case. During his testimony, he took several breaks and his stories just started falling apart piece by piece. This was over an entire day. They pointed out the inconsistencies, the cell phone searches, all of these items with his story versus what police actually found during their investigation. So in December of 2022, right after that grand jury proceeding, when he testified that day, that evening, he asked to speak with the district attorney's office. When he went into the district attorney's office to speak with him, with his lawyer present, they asked to give a proffer, which basically means he wanted to tell them everything he knew about what happened to his wife. During that proffer, he admitted to strangling and smothering his wife in the bed while she was sleeping. He choked her, then he put a pillow over her face until she was dead. So he then moved her from the bedroom down to the basement, and he admitted to cutting her body into numerous pieces and getting rid of those pieces of his wife's body in various places, including dumpsters, and burying a couple of parts of her body. Part of his proffer was that he would show investigators where he buried these bodies. They took the investigators to these sites, which happened to be in a tidal plain. So part of the time there was water over top of the area where portions of her body were discovered. When the water receded, they dug about 2 or 3 feet down and found pieces of her dismembered body in plastic bags underneath of the ground. When they took those pieces of the alleged victim's body out, they contacted me because they knew we had the rapid DNA instrument, and they knew that we had done some cases before where we were able to assist with the identification of human remains. They wanted to be sure that those pieces, those body parts that they found, did in fact belong to the missing woman, Elizabeth Capaldi, before they would file official charges against Stephen Capaldi in this case. The investigators contacted me. I actually went to the autopsy because the coroner's office wasn't quite sure the best types of samples to collect. Now, this body had been under the ground for about 2 months. The murderer actually did us a favor by putting it in several plastic bags. They were still in decent shape. There was a little bit of decomposition, but not a whole lot. And it was determined that the best thing for this particular evidence was to collect some bone marrow from the femur. Now, I want to talk a little bit about different things that you can look for if you're trying to do human identification using samples from autopsy that I've run into over the years. Some of the best items to collect are anything that's pink or red with blood, right? So if you have a heart muscle, piece of a heart muscle, and it all depends on the decomposition of the human remains. If the human remains are fairly intact, you could probably cut the liver open and do a swab inside of the liver, take a piece of the liver, put it right into the sample cartridge. You can take a piece of the heart muscle, other parts of the internal organs that would be very good for running in this rapid DNA instrument. As I said, in this particular case, I asked them to cut a piece of the femur out, and then we just took a regular cotton swab, swabbed inside of the femur bone, and got some bone marrow. I brought that back to my police department. I took the bone marrow swab, placed it right into the cartridge, put it into the rapid DNA instrument, and it produced a full female profile. They had also collected a buccal swab from the alleged daughter of the victim, which was also ran in the rapid ID instrument as well. Those two profiles were then put into the software that comes with the RapidHIT ID that has kinship and familiar searches in it. When I did a search of any persons related to the unidentified body parts, I got a match. 99.99% chance that the DNA collected from the body parts was a parent of the other sample that was in the database that in this fact was her daughter. So there was a match to the suspected daughter. We were able to provide a report, which you can see in the top left-hand corner, to the district attorney's office, in fact, saying there was a parent-child relationship here and that they could, in fact, have the information they need to not only repatriate the remains to the family, but also to charge Stephen Capaldi with this death. So in December 2022, Stephen Capaldi was charged with third-degree murder and other offenses, including abuse of a corpse, a few others, in their home in Sellersville, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And in April of just in 2023, he ended up pleading guilty to killing his wife, and he's sentenced to 22 to 44 years in state prison. This rapid DNA instrument was key to the investigation to charge the person, but also to get these remains back to the family. The unfortunate part is they weren't able to recover all of her remains, but they were able to give the family some closure to this case by returning the remains that they had found. I'm going to move on to another rapid DNA case study, familial kinship. In March of 2021, Percy Borough Police Department took a missing person report for an adult male. It happens. We get these all the time. But in June of 2021, relatives of the missing person provided samples that were uploaded into the NamUs database, which is the national database for missing people. In November of 2021, Baltimore County Police, Maryland, which is probably about 2.5 to 3 hours away from Percy Borough, conducted a homicide investigation where an unidentified male was found in an alleyway, but they never put his DNA into NamUs. If they had put it in, and it was just an oversight, if they had put it in, they probably would have gotten a match to the relatives that had given their samples. So I have to give a lot of credit to the Percy Borough PD detectives. They, for years, continued to search any unidentified found remains throughout the 3-4 state area. During that time, in April of 2023, they come across this homicide victim in Baltimore County that generally matched the description of the person that was missing from Percy Borough back in 2021. Fortunately, the coroner's office down in Baltimore County had taken an FTA card of blood from the person at autopsy. I got contacted because they asked if I could help to identify these remains. The blood from the FTA card was placed in a cartridge, run in the RapidHIT ID instrument, and a full male DNA profile was produced in 90 minutes. They also provided me a sample of the mother's buccal swab, and I ran the mother's buccal swab, did the same search in the software that comes with the RapidHIT ID instrument, and lo and behold, that homicide victim in Baltimore County was identified with the familial kinship DNA application that was found in the RapidLink software that comes with the RapidHIT ID instrument. So this is another case where, albeit for detectives, we're searching for years and years and years, but we were able to positively identify this victim, get his remains back to the family, and have some closure to this, and also help Baltimore County with the homicide investigation, which I don't think they ever found who had done this. But the big picture was that they at least knew the victim. And one more case study here. This made national news. This happened all the way back in July of 2017. A person by the name of Cosmo DiNardo lured these 4 young children, young kids, 15, 16, 17, to a large farm in Bucks County with the intention of killing them to see what it felt like to kill somebody. He did this. He killed all 4 of them by shooting them. After the fact, he took one boy and buried him up on a hill on the very large farm. The other 3 boys were then Unfortunately, their bodies were put in a very large, like, barbecue grill that was made out of a 55-gallon drum. He attempted to burn their remains, which didn't work so well because he closed the lid when he lit the fire, and the fire went out because it lacked oxygen. He then buried them in a very deep grave on the farm. When all the bodies were recovered, the district attorney's office came to me and Bensalem Township Police saying that we would like to identify these human remains before we tell the families these are in fact their boys that are missing. We got exemplars from the families, the victims' toothbrushes from home. We were able to run swabs in the RapidHIT ID and get profiles off the toothbrushes. And then I went to autopsy. We collected similar items like I talked about in the earlier case. We were able to place them in the RapidHIT ID as well. And we were able to identify all 4 of these boys so that families could be notified and that their remains can get back to them so that they can have some type of closure with these deaths. So once again, we use this numerous times for these type of identifications. I would also like to say that not only do we do inclusions with the rapid DNA instrument, we do exclusions as well. We've had several cases where somebody says, yes, that's the person that did it. They point them out. We've actually put people in prison before. And after running DNA samples in the RapidHIT ID, within 90 minutes, we knew we had the wrong person, or we knew that the person identified as the actor was not the person who did it, based on DNA findings from different cases. I would like to do one more rapid DNA case study for you, and this is an exoneration like I just talked about. We had an elderly victim who stated that she was sexually assaulted by a known person. She said, I've known him for years. He came over to my apartment. My husband died like 2 weeks before. He sat down with me. We had coffee together, and he said, I'm sorry for your loss. I know what you need. The male took her into the bedroom and sexually assaulted her. We were able to send her for a SANE examination, collect vaginal swabs, and send them to the lab for a very quick turnaround. And the DNA from the sperm that were found on the vaginal swab was entered into our local DNA database. Obviously, this woman had pointed one person out and said, that's the guy that did it. So what did we do? We arrest him on the spot. We say, hey, you're identified. This lady knows you. We put him in prison. Well, he's like, I didn't have anything to do with it. So we said, would you give us a DNA sample? He gave us a buccal swab. We ran it in the rapid DNA instrument. In 90 minutes, we got a profile back that did not match the vaginal swab. We're like, oh my gosh. This is a problem. We contacted our district attorney's office. We had that person pulled out of jail immediately. We then went back to the victim and asked her, hey, there's a problem here. This is not the person who matched the DNA that was found during your SANE exam. She ended up giving 2 other people's names, and we learned our lesson the first time. We asked these people, of course, they both denied involvement in this sexual assault. We asked them to give us a consensual buccal swab. We ran it in the DNA instrument. And, of course, they did not match the vaginal swab either. It was the 4th name that this victim had given us that eventually matched the vaginal swab from the sexual assault. So in this particular case, the woman who had been assaulted had some memory issues, some mental degradation that wasn't really apparent. And she had named the wrong persons in this. We were able to eventually identify the right person. But the important part about this is that we took somebody that we had put in prison with a person-on-person identification, saying that's the person who did it, and got them out of prison within days by utilizing this rapid DNA instrument. And we kept 2 other people from being put in prison after also being identified by this victim. It's nothing against the victim herself. I'm sure she was trying to do the right thing and thought she remembered things properly. But in this particular case, we exonerated these people, and that has become a very important piece of how we use this instrument. For us, in Bensalem, and I'm sure for other departments across the country that are utilizing this, is we use the rapid DNA instrument in conjunction with our BioHITs database, a DNA database. When you put these two things together, you get 90-minute DNA that can be checked against the database. It is so powerful for us, and I don't know what we would do without it. And I don't know why more departments aren't using this type of technology for investigations, for inclusions, for exclusions, and for human identification, because it's caused a major reduction in crime here in Bensalem Township. We're getting criminals off the streets in 90 minutes. Sometimes when they're still sitting in our cells, we're able to run their DNA sample to see if they match the crime that we've arrested them for and know positively if their DNA was found. And our big thing here is that we want to do everything we can to prevent tomorrow's victim. The faster we get a person off the street that has committed a crime, the less people he or she has an opportunity to victimize down the road. So this is just a very brief slide of what we say here. This is our mission statement here in Bensalem Township. We want to do everything we can to protect our community. You can call me with any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions for you. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you listening to me today.